Tino, 1 on, 2 out, pitch is swung on and drilled to deep right center. It is high, it is far, it is gone! The Bam Tino with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth. He drills a game-tying 2-run home run. Oh, the Bam Tino delivers big time. And the Yankees, on the precipice of defeat, tie the game at 3. Stretched by the right-hander. And the 2-2. Swung on and hit in the air to deep right. That ball is high. It is far. It is gone. Bernie goes boom. He hits a 3-run home run to right field with 2 out in the 8th. A 3-run dinger. And the Yankees take an 8.
And a hearty welcome and happy late Monday night to one and all. This is episode 156 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your getting late on Monday evening with me. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, have enjoyed the content but haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, and turn on those notifications. Or if you check this episode out on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, turn on those notifications. So I am a lifelong New York Yankees baseball fan. Not as much of a lunatic as I once was. I was the kind of fan who watched every pitch of every game as if his life depended on it. I almost thought that it did, weird as that might seem. My fandom was at its peak, sadly, when the team was at its nadir. The Yankee broadcaster, John Sterling, announced his retirement today. It was something that had been expected for a while, I guess since he started curtailing his schedule within the last number of years. He had worked a crazy number of games in a row, including postseason. And then in the summer of 2019, he got the flu or something, and he missed a series. And it was like, thought it was going to be the end of the world. This guy never missed any games. Even as he got older, he just didn't seem to get sick. And so he's had some health issues, I guess, over the last couple of years. And the Yankees had worked with him as far as reducing his schedule. But I guess either he didn't think he could do it anymore or he just was so tired of traveling. I like to think they came to a mutual agreement that he was going to walk away on his own as opposed to them sort of forcibly retiring him. But either way, his first season with the Yankees was 1989. Now, I grew up, my announcers growing up, so the Yankees did it differently back then. The TV guys would often also be in the radio booth in the same game. So Phil Rizzuto would do part of the game on TV, and then he would do part of the game on radio. And Bill White and Frank Messer, they often swapped back and forth between radio and TV. At a certain point in time, you kind of either did one or the other, at least with the Yankees. I don't know how other teams do it. Gary Cohen, the Mets' great broadcaster, was a radio guy, and he was just so good on the radio, and he was a character, he had a personality, so he ended up being on TV. But I didn't know who John Sterling was when he took over as the Yankees' lead radio play-by-play announcer in 1989. I feel like I knew the name. I knew that he had delivered a famous home run call in a really ridiculous New York Mets, Atlanta Braves, July 3rd into July 4th, I think it was, baseball game in 1985, the famous 19-inning game, where a Braves pitcher named Rick Camp, who was like one of the worst hitters in the history of baseball, like he wasn't just a bad hitter for a pitcher, it would have made a good hitting pitcher seem like Babe Ruth. That's how bad he was. And Rick Camp hit a home run, and John Sterling's call was just unbelievable, the way he kept screaming, Rick Camp, Rick Camp. But he took over for the Yankees, in 89, and the team was shit. The Yanks had been a contender. They won the 2 World Series in 77 and 8. They made the playoffs. They had a big year in 1980, washed out of the first round of the playoffs. The Royals blew them out 3 straight. In 1981, they had a terrific team. That was the strike-shortened season. It was like a split season. The Yanks got back to the World Series. And they didn't win. They won the first 2 games against the Dodgers and then lost the next 4. It was almost a reverse of the 78 World Series where the Yankees dropped the first 2 in L.A. and then came home, won all 3 at the stadium, and went back to L.A. to win Game 6. Dodgers essentially did the same thing, just in reverse. And then the Yankees had a number of good teams in the 80s. They finished over 500, 82, 83. They had a nice season in 84, even though they were never in contention. Then they had big teams in 85, 6, 7, and 8. Each of those Yankees teams would have made some kind of playoff under the current structure, except maybe the 88 team. I think they finished in like a 3-way tie for second or something, but that was not a very good team. But they were competitive. It's just, at the time, there were only 4 teams going to the playoffs in all of Major League Baseball. You had to win your division or you went home. And so, great Yankees such as Don Mattingly didn't see any playoffs in the 1980s, despite winning 96 games, 97 games one year, 92 games, 90 games. Tough shit. You're on the golf course the day after the season ends. The team slipped by the time Sterling got there. They had been almost great in the mid-'80s, and then players got a little older. Don Mattingly's prime kind of came and went while he was still in his 20s. Rickey Henderson was traded. Dave Winfield hurt his back, and then he was traded. Ron Guidry got old. A lot of things went wrong. And when Sterling came on the scene in 1989, the team was sort of expected to be a contender, but the hopes weren't really that high that they were going to have, a good season. And there were moments during that year where it looked like they might make a challenge for the division lead because no one was really playing that well. They kind of fell apart in the second half. And then the next year was one of the worst years in the history of the franchise. The New York Yankees, who had already won 22 World Series and had captured 33 American League pennants going into the 1989 season, they lost 95 games. And there didn't really seem to be much help on the horizon. And this is where it sort of gets tricky when you think in terms of prospects and whatnot. We were told that the farm system was bare. They didn't really have anybody that was going to make much hay. They had prospects, but they didn't have any A-level prospects. So I don't know what went through John Sterling's mind as they sucked in his first year, and in his second year, they lose 95 games. And he always would talk about how much fun it was. Just as an announcer, you're getting paid to do a job and paid well. But how much fun, as he said, do you know how much fun it is to come to the ballpark when you're in a pennant race? Well, as a fan, yeah. But the Yanks hadn't been in a real pennant race since 85, when they went neck and neck with the Blue Jays until the final couple of weeks, really the final weekend of the season. So the team was terrible in 1990. And in 91, they had their moments. They were actually over 500 early in the second half. And again, it looked like there was a chance because they were starting to bring up some young players. Bernie Williams, who became a huge star, he made his major league debut. They seemed to be moving in the right direction. And then the team just completely tanked and ended up losing more than 90 games again, which is, if you're over 500 in the second half, you got no business losing 90 games. That's just unacceptable. It's atrocious. And then the next year, in 92, they had another losing season, which started promisingly. They were like 9-3 after 12, and everything went to shit. It wasn't until the following year, 93, that we got a real pennant race. One of the last pennant races that the Yankees were involved in before the last, before the expansion of the playoff format. And the expansion of the playoff format was critical because the very first year of the wild card was the year after the strike. Was it a strike or a lockout? I think it was a strike. Either way, in 1994, the baseball season ended in August, and the Yankees were in first place, and then there was no season and no playoffs, nothing. A lot of baseball fans were pissed, and Bud Selig and the owners decided we kind of owe it to the fans to do something different. And what they did was they came up with a wild card. They added 2 extra playoff slots in each league. And a lot of fans still stayed away, but other fans were at least intrigued enough to say, hey, now, if you're just a good team, you have a chance to get to the playoffs, and who knows what could happen. Playoffs are kind of a crapshoot. So John Sterling had talked about his dream just as an announcer. He had never been to Yankee Stadium during the playoffs. And he talked about and kind of wanted the experience. Do you imagine what this ballpark would be like in a World Series? Would you imagine? These were things that he said, as a young suitor pines away for his love and doesn't know if he'll ever get her or him or anything. That's what he sounded like when he would say, he would go off in these kind of soliloquies during games. The team is down 7-0 in the 6th inning, and they're already 25 games under 500, and it's the West Coast, and he's tired, and he doesn't want to be there. He would throw stuff like that out just to make sure, just in case, like Bob Uecker in Major League, what's the difference? No one's listening. But people were listening. And in 1995, the Yankees got to go to the postseason only because there was a wild card. The team was nowhere all year. And in Don Mattingly's final season, they made this incredible turnaround late in the year and made the playoffs. And Sterling, I don't want to say that he raised his game because the guy was a really good announcer. Yes, he was better when he was younger. He didn't miss as many plays, but he had an amazing voice. Like, you don't last that long just by being charming. He really had a great voice for sports and for announcing. And what I remember about that year in particular is the Yankees down the stretch, as I said, the team was nowhere. And then inexplicably, as if the baseball gods decided, we owe Don Mattingly something. We owe this once great franchise something. They turned into the 27 Yankees or the 61 Yankees down the stretch. And they came from, it's almost like a Kentucky Derby race where a horse that's in last place as you're approaching the 3/4 turn comes all the way and ends up in second. In this case, the wild card. They were way behind everyone. And then all of a sudden, they started winning and winning and winning. And they went 25-6 in the last 31 games. And as that was going on, people not even just connected to the Yankees, but the local broadcasters, like the sportscasters and the Jack Currys of the world, the Marty Nobles, the guys that wrote daily columns, they picked up on the excitement. And it was the most exciting time for Yankee baseball since the 1981 World Series. Because with a week or so left, they got a real shot here. There's 3 teams for 2 playoff spots, and if the Yanks end up with the same record as Seattle and Anaheim, they're in. Because the powers that be hadn't figured out what to do in the event of a 3-way tie, so they just made an announcement, the Yanks are in. It felt like they were, in favor of the Yankees. Oh, everything's for the Yankees. But Sterling's enthusiasm during that time, and you can find some of his old home run calls on the internet from that particular year, but there's a game in Toronto. It was one of the most exciting endings to a regular season game ever. The Yankees went into Toronto. They had a 1-game lead on both Seattle and California. But if they lost the first game of the series, there was a chance that they could be tied. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I think it was that they had a one-game lead on Seattle, and they were tied with California. It was some permutation like that. They were down 3 runs in the 9th inning. They scored 2. They ran out of pinch hitters. They had a guy on first with 1 out, and Pat Kelly, who was a terrific fielder. Pat Kelly had been part of the previous regime. He was a marginal prospect who became a starter because they didn't have anybody better. He was a good fielder, but he didn't hit enough to be a major league second baseman. The Yankees were out of pinch hitters, and Pat Kelly hit a miraculous 2-run homer. And John Wetland, who was still in his prime, came on and got the save. And Sterling was so excited, it was one of his first of his infamous calls, "Duh, Yankees win, duh!" That game against Toronto, I want to say it was September 29, 1995. It got the first elongated version of John Sterling's "the Yankees win" call. He couldn't help it because when they won that game, unless something unbelievably absurd happened, they were going to the playoffs. And he and his partner at the time in the booth, who is still a Yankee broadcaster, now on TV, Michael Kay, they were so excited for those playoffs. And Michael Kay and Sterling agreed with him. They said the loudest they ever heard the building. John Sterling's dream, his fantasy, when the team was at their lowest point. Can you imagine? Could you imagine what this incredible ballpark will sound like? Well, they heard it. Game 1 of the 1995 American League Division Series, Yankees against the Ken Griffey Jr. Seattle Mariners. They said that was the loudest that Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built, OG Yankee Stadium, that is the loudest that it ever was, even though they went on to win 4 World Series later in the decade and into 2000. They said that first game and also the second game, which is, if you look up Game 2, Yankees-Mariners, 1995 ALDS, it is a top 10 greatest games in the history of baseball. That's a hill I'll go down on. It is an extraordinary baseball game. They said the ballpark was never as loud as it was during those games because it was, as much as they were excited, so were the fans, especially in a season that seemed lost. It was a lost season, and they were so close last year, that stupid strike. They were going to win the American League East, and they were a title contender. They probably would have won close to 100 games in 1994. And then all of a sudden, in late August, they catch fire. And even though they ended up losing that series to Seattle, it was the worst, by far the worst particular series loss ever, because we knew Mattingly was retiring. And the way they won those first 2 games, they had a big home run barrage late in Game 1 to win that one. And then Mattingly homering in Game 2, every Gen X Yankee fan crying their eyes out, including myself, when he hit a home run to put them in the lead. And then they end up winning this crazy extra inning that didn't end until after 2 a.m. in the rain. They ended up losing that series. But what we didn't know, it wasn't a one-off. Because in John Sterling's mind, he just wanted one time. When a team is terrible, you're not imagining that greatness, icon, legendary, all-timer. You're not thinking that it's going to happen. They lost 95 games. Then they lost 91. Then they lost 87. And then they just started to win. And they got better. Because suddenly they weren't just producing players from the system. They weren't producing just Pat Kelly, Jeff Johnson, Andy Stankiewicz, Bam Bam Mullins. They began to produce stars. Derek Jeter, Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada, Mariano Rivera. They began to produce stars. That's how you do it. It's not just signing big money free agents. It's your young guys becoming all-stars. Andy Pettitte, who was an okay prospect, and all of a sudden, holy shit, this kid could be the best lefty we've had since Guidry. Yep, exactly. So the Yankees won 4 World Series in 5 years. And Jam Master Jay, as his friend and occasional antagonist who wrote for the Daily News, Bob Raceman, always called him Jam Master Jay. But it was hard not to appreciate his enthusiasm. Even Mets fans, he's a clown, those stupid home run calls, but there was something about Sterling that people really responded to. And I remember Mike and a Mad Dog, they used to have fun listening to his crazy home run calls. And Francesa and Sterling actually were friends off the air. And Russo, they knew each other a little bit, but Mike Francesa of WFAN, Mike and the Mad Dog at the time, he considered Sterling like, no, we're actually friends. He's not just some guy I know who does the Yankee broadcast. I've been out with him, we've hung out, whatever. 4 World Series in 5 years. And some incredible, memorable home run calls, last out calls. David Wells' perfect game, extraordinary. The David Cohn perfect game. The way the Yankees made comebacks in the 96 playoffs, the first series against Texas, they were in huge trouble. And they got off the deck, or as Sterling said, the gutty, gritty Yankees get off the deck to take Game 3. And even though the Yankees more or less stopped winning World Series after 2000, they were still competitive. And this is the thing that I hate to drag and rip on young people. But when it comes to sports fandom, and John Sterling was a sports fan, he did basketball, he did the Atlanta Braves, a lot of different teams, but he clearly diehard Yankee fan. You can't fake the level of enthusiasm he's shown for all these years. Unless you have lived through your team being awful, I feel like you can't really appreciate fully when the team is great. Because if you start off with the team being great, you expect the team to always be great. You expect every year that you're going to be a title contender. And the truth is, Yankee fans were unbelievably spoiled during the entire Joe Torre era and well into what was then, the kind of Derek Jeter era. They were title contenders. Even all those years in the 2000s that they flamed out in the playoffs. 102 wins, 99 wins, 98 wins, 94 wins. They had big teams every year. And my dad and I, we like to just listen to Sterling's home run calls after the games. We weren't really that interested in the highlights. But we listened to the highlights just to hear what ridiculous home run call he would put on. When Johnny Damon hit a home run, is he going to say positively demonic? Is he going to say it's a Johnny Rocket? Is he going to say it's a Damon Dinger? These are the kinds of things we actually were talking about. I bet he says positively demonic. Those home run calls were so stupid and yet so sublime. David Justice hits a home run. Justice is served in the Bronx. Bernie Williams, one of the greats. Burn, baby, burn. Derek Jeter, El Capitan. Bobby Abreu, Il Como Dulce, Bobby Abreu, as sweet as candy. Tino Martinez, the Bam-Tino. Jason Giambi, the Giambino. Robbie Cano, don't you know? Then he had the kind of obscure ones with guys that didn't hit that many home runs. Nick Green. Nick Green ended up having a pretty good career as a fill-in, like a bench player, utility man for the Red Sox, among other teams. Nick Green hit 1 home run with the Yankees in 2006. It's not easy being Nick Green. He hits a 2-run homer. All-time #1 favorite, obscure John Sterling home run call. There was a famous story, I think it was in 1976. It was was it Game 4 of the American League Championship Series? There was a fire elsewhere in the Bronx as they were playing Game 4, Yanks-Royals. I think it was Keith Jackson. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Bronx is burning." And that became the name of a book and a miniseries about the Yankees and Billy Martin and George Steinbrenner. The Bronx is burning. Well, the Yankees had a player who had been a star with Toronto, and by the time he got to the Yanks, he was no longer very good. Vernon Wells. And John Sterling's home run call when Vernon got a hold of one. The Bronx is Vernon. The Bronx is Vernon. Now, he knew these home run calls were stupid, but he had fun with it. And fans, on the one hand, would say, I wish he would stop, but they couldn't get enough. There are Twitter pages devoted just to his home run calls. All rise. Here comes the judge. Oh, McCann can. Yes, McCann can. Brian McCann. You're on the mark, Teixeira. He sends a text message. It's an A-bomb from A-Rod. It's a thriller by Godzilla. One after another, all those years. Shane Spencer, the home run dispenser. Nick Swisher, he is Swisherlicious. Raul be seeing you in the right field seats, Raul Ibanez. But truth be told, there were stretches of my life where I listened to an awful lot of Yankee broadcasts. But really, in the last decade, there haven't been too many times that I would be on like a road trip or something like where I would have to, where the radio would be the only way to get the game. And honestly, I haven't watched that many games from start to finish. Gone to games, but at home, I mean, yeah, maybe playoffs. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs? It's just different. I mean, I'm still a huge fan, but I don't live and die with every game. I don't lose sleep when they lose. The idea of losing sleep and having your actual regular life affected when your team loses is ridiculous, but you know, I wasn't alone. There's a lot of people, even now, you lose a tough game and you have trouble sleeping, as if it's your team, not just the team that you're rooting for. But over the last number of years, because I'm not listening to every pitch, I'm not a radio guy, Sterling has worked less and less, and also the percentage of calls he's gotten wrong has gone up. So when you get to be in your mid-80s, and it is a stressful job, this is not an easy thing to do. For a younger person, it would be stressful. All the travel, the time zone switches. It's not an easy life. And he's been doing this for 55 years? More? I just hope that he has a number of good years left. I hope that he's able to actually enjoy some leisure time, doing things other than calling baseball games and getting criticized and mocked and ridiculed when he fucks up a call and does a home run that's not really a home run. You know, Phil Rizzuto for decades was famous for getting calls wrong. But Phil Rizzuto was a Hall of Fame baseball player. He had a lot more latitude. John Sterling in the 90s, when he would screw up a call, had fans screaming, you know, Mike and Amanda, got to fire this guy. He acted like we were going to win the game when Jeter hit that ball. It was going to be a three-run walk-off. Guy caught it on a warning track. Fire him. Okay. It's a tough town. But Sterling didn't have that many controversies. I guess he wasn't in the limelight as much as a manager, certainly not as much as a player, or an owner like George Steinbrenner, who certainly was no stranger to controversy. But he showed up for work every day for 30 years. He didn't miss any games from 1989, as far as I know, until that he got sick in 2019. He couldn't go in front of the mic. He was already, 80, 81 years old at the time. What a life. And what a run. I remember in like 1998-ish that Mike Francesa in one of the Mike and the Mad Dog shows was saying, Sterling's really had a great run here. Think about what the team has done in the last couple of years. Not knowing how many more playoff games, World Series games that Sterling was going to call. How many more iconic, humorous home run calls he was going to come up with. What a life in baseball. Jam Master Jay, John Sterling, retiring, and he says he's not doing any more games. He's already called his last game. I guess it was April 7th. I didn't even know that he hadn't worked since April 7th. It shows how much attention I pay to the radio side. John Sterling, 85 years old, in what is his 36th year as New York Yankees broadcaster, is retiring. And I just wanted to kind of give my thoughts as somebody who, certainly in the 90s, I listened to a lot of games, driving to and from school and college back then. Just in general, any road trip, anytime I visited my sister at college, radio on, a lot of baseball. And his play-by-play, especially in the 90s, he was a lot younger, was really, really good. He had a good eye and great voice. And really nothing but great memories. Even the seasons that ended badly for the Yankees, you could always find incredible John Sterling home run calls. Another amazing thing about YouTube and sound waves, there's so many golden John Sterling moments from all the way back in the 90s. 1991 Memorial Day, his berserker call of Mel Hall's 3-run walk-off homer to beat the Red Sox. The first slight bit of sunlight in that dark period. Game they were losing 5-0 to the first place Red Sox. And they rallied and hit a big home run. Bernie was getting ready to be called up, and they selected Derek Jeter in the next draft. So 91 was a down year, but they had that. But that home run call, to listen to Sterling, you would have thought the team was going to the World Series. That's how much excitement he was still able to generate from what amounted to a second division team in a down season. Still had that excitement and that enthusiasm, and it kind of transferred over to the fan base. Best wishes for a number of more happy and healthy years to John Sterling.